Greetings to all class 8 students again. What we have learnt so far is the camel was asked by all three of his animal colleagues, the horse, the dog, and the ox, to work like them and not to sit idle, as they otherwise would end up doing his share of work. This was nicely avoided by the camel simply by saying humph. That means he wanted to reply to all three animals that he did not care about what they were doing and why were they asked to make up for those lost hours by him. He got away from any work simply by saying humph, humph. Perhaps that means he wanted to say, go away, or I don't care. You see, he was acting like a selfish camel. He even replied the same thing to the jinn, the one who had the power, the one who was a celestial being, a supernatural character, you see. He ended up, I think we ended up here in our last video, and now we are going to start again with the second part of this story. Let's start from here. I'm on page number 4. Okay. The jinn remonstrated with the camel, who said, Humph, remember what did we leave in the last video with? We learnt that there was a panchayat, there was a meeting amongst all three animals, and the jinn also lately joined in, and he heard everybody's complaint. And then straight away he appeared before the camel, right? The camel's beautiful back suddenly grew a lump, which was the camel's hump. The jinn assured the camel his hump would always be a help and not a hindrance. Now, there are a couple of hard words here for you. Let me explain the meanings of them. To remonstrate, that means to rebuke, to scold, or to complain. You see, the jinn appeared again before the camel. In this part, this is what you're going to learn. And he complained about the camel's laziness, his idleness, him sitting doing nothing. And as a result of the camel's repeatedly replies, humph, 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 he actually earned a beautiful hump on his back. You see, what is a lump? A lump is a sort of, you can say, a mass of substance without any shape. Lump could be of any shape, and it's, going to be wobbly. And another word is a hindrance. Even while punishing the camel, the jinn has been good with the camel because he wanted the camel to learn from his mistake. So therefore, what did he say? He told him that the hump that he has earned because of his idleness will never become an obstacle on his way. The hump will always be helpful, right? So, this is what all the things that we are going to learn in the second part. Let's start. The jinn rolled himself up in his dust cloak and took a walk across the desert and found the camel looking at his own reflection in a pool of water. You see, you can see the jinn appearing before the camel in a dust of cloak. Yes, that means disguising him, hiding him. And as soon as he appeared before the camel, what did he find? The camel is quite busy looking at himself into the waters. He's looking at his reflection and perhaps he's praising himself, he's admiring his look, his shape and everything. Look at this. As soon as the jinn appeared, he asked something. My friend, said the jinn, what's this I hear of you doing no work? The jinn sat down with his chin in his hand, while the camel looked at his own reflection in the pool of water. You see, do you think is he paying any heed to what the jinn has asked the camel? See what happens when one excessively self-praise or self-admire, he or she would forget all about the others around him and their contribution. You see, one would also forget his duty that he should keep under any circumstances. There is a very thin line between self-dignity, confidence, and arrogance. One does not come to know while self-admiring. Now, self-admiration could be for anything, for achievements, for accomplishments, for one's success, for prosperity, riches, the color, the complexion, the pride could be for anything. When his pride and admiration becomes a false pride, arrogance, and a fake vanity. You see, one has to be very careful praising themselves. So while the camel was looking at himself into the waters, he did not pay much heed to what the jinn said. He kept on looking at his reflection and kept on admiring his beautiful looks. He thought he looked beautiful. Let's imagine the hump was not there on his back, and therefore he thought, oh, he looked so pretty. Okay, you have given the three. The three here written in capital to have more emphasis on all three animals, because all three animals were suffering because of the camel. They all were overloaded with the work which was missed out by the camel. See, what did he say? You have given the three extra work ever since Monday morning, all on account of your idleness, said the jinn. And he went on thinking with his chin in his hand, waiting for the camel's reply. Look at the two of them in the picture. The camel quite engrossed, looking at him, engaged, and the jinn waiting for his reply. Right? Let's go to the next paragraph. See, what did he reply? Humph, said the camel. The same reply what he had given to all three animal friends, that goes for the jinn also. I shouldn't say that again if I were you. See, this is a clear warning coming from the jinn. He says, if I were you, if I was you, I would have never uttered that word. Humph. You might say it once too often. I want you to work. Right. There is an idiom hidden here. Once too often. Right. It is an idiom that means to repeat a bad action with the punishment which will influence one's life, make difference, and may cause trouble in future. You see, the camel repeatedly said, he made the mistake of saying this thing repeatedly, humph, 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 to everybody, whoever wanted to send him to work. This thoughtless action of him will bring him a punishment now. He is liable to get a punishment for his mistake. Right? And the camel said again, what? Humph! But no sooner had he said it than he saw his back that he was so proud of. What happened to that back? Puffing up and puffing up into a great, great big hump. You see how his mistake of repeatedly saying humph, humph to everybody really brought him a real hump on his back. Look at this. Do you see that? Said the jinn. Now suddenly the humpless back became a back with a hump. So the beauty that he was admiring, the self-praise that he was having for himself, all shattered. That's your very own hump that you have brought upon your very own self by not working. This is a very important line that you should make a note of it, students. This can be good for the reference to context questions, and you should understand these words spoken by the jinn. You may have questions like who said these words, to whom these words were said, and what was the reason, right? So it is better that you understand it clearly. The jinn, said these words to the camel to make him realize his mistake. You see, we all make mistakes, and we all can make mistake. But what we all cannot do is we have to learn a lesson from every mistake that we made. Okay? If we are unable to learn from our mistakes, that means we will keep on repeating our mistakes one after the other, right? So to avoid it, we should learn from it, and that is what the jinn wanted the camel to learn, to stop saying humph, humph, humph to anyone and to go back to work. So that's why he says, see, I'm going to repeat this. That's your very own humph that you have brought upon your very own self by not working. Right. Today is Thursday and you have done no work since Monday. So Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday and Thursday. All 3 days' work seemed to be pending, and the other 3 animals who were already having their own share of work were overloaded because of the camel. When the work began, now you are going to work. So that was the order summoned. You see, the camel was summoned, ordered and punished by the jinn. You see, what did he reply? How can I, said the camel, with this hump on my back? You see the complaining tone of the camel. It seems he is still not in the mood of going back to work even after being punished. You see, there are people in this world, once they are punished for their mistake, they never learn from their mistakes and they keep on repeating their mistakes. Wise people usually learn when they fall once. They don't fall second time. You see, it is said if you fall once, it is not your mistake. Perhaps you fall for the second time, it's again not your mistake. But when you fall for the third time, it is certainly your mistake. You see, that means you have not learned anything from the previous 2 falls that you had. So similarly, this camel also is failing to learn from his mistake, that he has been punished and he needs to go back to work. So he still complains, how can I go back to work with this big hump on my back? That has a purpose, said the jinn. All because you missed those 3 days. You will be able to work now for 3 days without eating because you can live on your hump. And don't you ever say I never did anything for you. Come out of the desert and go to the tree and behave yourself. That means be good with all your animal colleagues. You see, what did the jinn say to him? What did he order? He asked him to go back to work with his very own hump and not to ever complain about the hump, because this hump will always be helpful. It will never be a hindrance. It will never be an obstacle, but it will always be helpful wherever he goes. Right. And it is true still till the date that the camel can store a lot of fat in his hump and can live without food, water for days while is he traveling in the desert. You see? So, just think about it. The 3 days work that the camel missed, what did he do else then? He kept on eating, doing no work. So what did the jinn do for him? He sent him to work without food, without water. So this was a lesson for the camel to learn. And the camel went away to join the 3. And from that day to this, the camel always wears a humph. Well, what we call that humph is a hump now. Not to hurt his feelings, yes, because we don't want to tell the camel that, yes, your idleness has earned you this beautiful hump on your back. But he has never yet caught up with the 3 days that he missed at the beginning of the world. And he has never yet learned how to behave. That means he is still roaming in the deserts without food and without water. Right. So, you see, this is how the camel was punished by the jinn. He gave the punishment which was useful for the camel, as his hump can hold a lot of fat, which will give the camel a lot of energy while walking in deserts without eating anything for days. This story teaches us that it is important for all of us to do our share of work, because when everybody works together, everybody can also relax together and can save a lot of time. If one doesn't work, his work will remain pending. And like the other 3 animals, the horse, the ox, and the dog, people around you also will complain about you. You see, your work creates your impression in life. Okay? So don't let your impression be like the indolent camel, but be painstaking and industrious like the horse, the dog, and the ox. Students, this story also shows that animals are a part of our environment and they are our friends. They are important and useful to us in many ways. So we should treat them right and look after them without violating their rights. Okay. See how the writer has ended the chapter. He says, and he has never yet learned how to behave. So what do you think the writer thinks about the camel? He thinks that the camel is still very lazy animal and he remains unwilling to work. The jinn asked him to go to the 3 animals and help them out. But he still lives in the desert carrying his hump and unable to complete those pending 3 days' work, you see, which he has missed. And that is the reason he still keeps roaming in the desert with his hump on his back. You see, such a great thinking of the writer Rudyard Kipling. And you know that he loved to write short stories, especially for kids. So, this is what this story is practically not possible. Yes, it doesn't seem to be very plausible. Perhaps it is not true. Perhaps it is only a fable. You see, it's a story that has been made up. Right, now let's go to the comprehension exercise. This is the second comprehension check. The first question asks, the camel was looking at his own reflection in the pool. What does he suggest? What does it suggest to you about the camel? Well, the camel looking into the reflection of himself into the waters does suggest it that he was a self-admiring and a self-praising selfish animal. You see, I think we have discussed about him looking into the water. That means what happens when one excessively self-admires oneself and keeps on praising themselves. The reason could be any, right? So that means he forgot about others' contribution, that others around him were equally valuable as him, right? So it does speak of his selfish nature somewhere, right? The second question says, the camel said humph repeatedly. How did it affect him? The camel's saying humph repeatedly earned him a real hump on his back. It was his mistake and he had to pay for it. You see, the jinn has punished him so that he can learn from his mistake. Now, anytime he wanted to sit idle, he would think of earning one more hump. You see? So, straight away he would rush to work. Right. Number 3 says, what according to the jinn was the use of the hump? Right. I think the hump will hold enough fuel for him while he was at work. Scientifically, it is proven that the hump can hold a lot of fat, which is a food to animal's body, in absence of the fodder. That means in absence of vegetation, when the camels have to walk long ways and they go really without food and water, the hump, the fat which is stored in the hump, comes handy to them. It in this way is very helpful and not a hindrance, not an obstacle. You see, so the jinn has been good to him. He has definitely punished him, but he gave him a useful thing, not an obstacle. Right. Number 4, he has never yet learned to behave. In the light of this, what is the writer's opinion about the camel? That means when the writer has written down this sentence, when he gives this statement, what did he mean? Well, his opinion we had already talked about. He says that the camel has not learned to behave in a good manner till date. He gives the reason that he still roams into the deserts and he goes for days without food and without water, and he has not yet learned to work. He is still lazy and idle, who still remains in the middle of the howling desert. You see? Okay, so we have completed Comprehension Check 1 in earlier video and Comprehension Check 2 questions in this video. Let's check out next if we have any other exercise to be done. Right, you can see a red color box here and some extra exercises are given to you. I want you to write the answers of Comprehension Check 2nd and Comprehension Check exercise in the first part to be done in your CW or wherever you are writing your answers in a rough book or anywhere else. Okay, I shall not ask you to do the exercise which is given here on page number 6 in this red box, but we can certainly talk about them. You see, discuss the following topics in group. Let's read. What does it ask? Can this story be factually true? Well, you must be able to analyze the information and the data which is given in this story and then just try to think, you see, ponder over what you have learned in this chapter. Can this story be true? Do you think the camels earlier were born without a hump? Or do you think the jinns were in charge of the deserts? Were such things plausible? Or are they plausible? Are they practical enough? Not really, isn't it? So this must be a fable, simply a short story that can give a moral, that can leave a good message for all of us to learn. So it doesn't seem to be practically true, but yes, you can learn from such stories a lot. Right, what according to you is the story about? Is this story about how the camel has gotten the hump? Or is this story about how the world has begun? Or why everyone should do their share of work seriously? Or how animals are important to humans? What is the theme of this chapter here, students? That is what you need to. Is it the first one, the second one, third, or the fourth one? I think the story preaches why everybody should do their share of work seriously and wholeheartedly. If one doesn't work properly, that means the others who are already working will have to have the overload. Plus, not working seriously has its own disadvantages, right? So, all such things should be avoided and one should sit down and work seriously towards success, right? Question third and fourth are there for you to just ponder over, think about them, right, in your leisure time. You don't have to write this exercise in your CW, but you have to write only Comprehension Check 1 and 2 in your CW or wherever you are writing. With this chapter getting over today, we are leaving it here, and in our next video perhaps we'll go back to honeydew, okay, your main textbook. Thank you very much. Keep learning till then, please. Stay home and stay safe. Keep healthy.